It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza, good morning.
Hello, Irwin.
You
And maybe
know,
I should have been more sing-song considering our topic of today.
it would have been an appropriate segue. You know, we did sing Esperanza. I continue to refer back to this when you and I did a rendition
We
during
had
the.
some ZZ Top
We
there.
did have some ZZ Top of legs.
Really classy.
Yeah, that was and I could Esperanza. No, I didn't break out my guitar because I don't want to alienate our audience, Esperanza, but I could really break it out or just look into your eyes over Zoom and say, Hannah Honey was a peachy kind of girl. Anyway, is that sort of Mick-like, did you think, or not really? Probably not.
You're just like him.
Oh my God. I you know, did you see that? I got like, woman says that to me. I got a little flustered.
You
Okay.
flustered. I know. That was the word.
Very funny. But anyway, we are, Esperanza, talking about, in this episode, really, Esperanza is more than the Rolling Stones time at the Memory Motel. It really is about, well, that's the backdrop. It's about Montauk
Yes.
right? A time
Yes.
and a place of how 50, yes, 50 years ago.
Don't remind me, Irwin.
Oh, you know, I could be your older brother. I mean, if I'm not reminding you, think of
Well,
me.
better than,
Okay.
my father.
Yeah.
You're
Biologically,
not
yes,
that
probably.
old.
But now in 1975, I was not quite 18 years old, but I remember this song really so vividly,
Are
and
you a Stones fan, Irwin?
I would call myself, yeah, I mean, I like the Stones. I mean, but they're really almost, it's more about their icons more than anything at this point. I mean, it was especially in my year, it was the Stones, the Beatles. I mean, that was, it was really, they
Yeah,
were,
I lean more toward Beatles. That's
yeah,
why.
I
Sorry,
always did as
fans of
well,
our
but
Hamptons,
right. But
if you're
I'll tell you,
offended by that.
I'll tell you one thing: the Stones had more staying power. My God, they're still around. But anyway, this was really about of a time, of a place, and there's a lot of information out there, and I got to preface it and say to our audience right away: look, a lot of this and a lot of the things we're going to touch on, Esperanza, is really sort of urban legend and myth, and it's a lot of, to give a baseball analogy, which I like to do, in 1951, when Bobby Thompson hit the shot heard round the world at Ebbets Field, 30,000 people were in Ebbets Field, but it's been documented that 3 million people said they were there the day Bobby Thompson hit that home run. So I think it's a similar kind of story.
They
Uh,
just all wanted to
yeah,
be there. That's
exactly. And they sort of transported themselves there,
yeah.
sort of the way we try to transport our audience to a time and place. Wow, what a segue, which is what I'm going to try to do now and with you together. So, Mick and the Stones decamped into Montauk, really on the verge of a very big worldwide tour. And they were forced there, and not to get too deep in the weeds, but they were having some tax issues back in the UK. They were rehearsing all over the world in the French Riviera, Switzerland, LA, Jamaica, Rotterdam, Munich. A lot of it were these tax issues, but they decamped into Montauk in a Esperanza, in a very, very different Montauk. We should really go
Oh, no
down this.
doubt. I mean, I'm thinking this is this is when my family came here. I mean, this is pretty much the same time. We were here a year later. So can't have been that much different a
No,
year later. Yeah.
no. And we always like to bring in a cast of characters when we bring out an episode, right, Esperanza? And we're going to bring these people in now. Obviously, circa 1975, I guess you could even say circa 2025, there's sort of a cool factor associating yourself with the Stones, right? You know, Andy Warhol, Lee Radziwill, she made an appearance when we did an episode about Grey Gardens with Jerry
Yes.
Torrey, right? Truman Capote, Ahmed Erdogan, and then, Peter Beard, and even later day, the Julian Schnabels and whatnot. I mean, all of these people were part and parcel, wanted to associate themselves with the Stones. And Esperanza, the Stones were staying at, and we had a little conversation about this before, at the Warhol estate, the property he owned with Paul Morrissey. How are we pronouncing it, Esperanza?
Well, so is it Eothen or Eothen? I'm not sure. It's Greek to me.
No pun intended. Exactly.
No,
But
actually, fully intended. It's
oh, that's great. That's great. So,
or
anyway,
as as we were talking earlier, let's just call it the church estate.
okay, that's probably really more appropriate. I would agree. But anyway, they decamped at this property. And look, we've spoken about that. We haven't had an episode about this, Esperanza. We've spoken about that as a majestic property, really at the
Oh, it's just gorgeous.
oh
Yeah.
my God,
Yeah.
it like clusters of little cabins with really high elevation. And
Well,
it's,
the Montauk Bluffs are just an
yeah,
amazing place, and it's like Scottish Highlands, the grasses and the moor, and fortunately, and maybe I'm getting ahead of us, but this part, not precisely where the cottages are, but right next to it is now fully preserved,
right.
which is accessible through the Nature Conservancy, and is like a walk back in time to this place back when Arthur Benson
That's
came,
right.
really, I think.
That's right. I mean, that it is, I guess, look, one of the beauties of Montauk is how much of it is preserved. I think it's over 60%. But the further east you go, and especially when you get out there, to your point, the bluffs, it is so dramatic.
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
you're perched really literally like on the edge of the earth.
totally true. Totally true. And, this writer really does a great job at Christopher Lawrence, sort of, describing it, the windswept Montauk of fishermen and carpenters was at this time hosting its first few surfers and artists and celebrities, and that was a dramatic pause. We do that on everything. But
I think it's a cyclical thing, as we know. It's not exactly surfers maybe, but artists, celebrities, I think those had come before.
I mean, yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, but it
Might be
was,
a bit of hyperbole, but yeah.
but getting into like the whole Memory Motel, and again, I think Mick Jagger actually, I don't know how many of the songs have Stone songs he actually wrote, but I think he was the writer on this one. But just we spent a lonely night at the Memory Motel, and it was a story really about this affair, I guess, that he had. And again, having never led the rock star life, Esperanza, I don't know what these kind of things are like, but
You just look the part, right?
oh my God, listen to God.
But yes, and I do know that I read that he and Keith Richards wrote this
Oh,
together. They
okay,
collaborated. Yeah.
thank you, but you know. Now the Memory Motel, as I remember it. Now, is this memory? Is it still the one they're really referring to? This was sort of a old battered building in its day,
Yes.
right? I mean, is now has this been? I should have really. I was just in Montauk yesterday, and I didn't realize. And I realized it. Has this been
Revamped
repurposed?
in some
Yeah,
way. Well, all I can say is I drove by there recently and I saw some very large signage that looked as if they had taken away the Memory Motel signage, which is so iconic. But this building, which was apparently built in 1926
that's right.
by a local sea captain whose son had died, and he out at sea, and he built this in his, as like an homage to him or something like that. So it's an old building. It's actually a historic old
That's
building.
right.
Honestly, it should be landmarks. Let's just go there. The sign should be landmarked, the whole thing anyway. But right now, as from what I can see on Instagram, they're just hosting very wild parties. And I'm sure, you know, bar service there, that, the table costs $1,500 or
Yeah.
something like that.
A-
Who knows?
and it's sort of, I'm not going to say it's living on the reputation of the Stones visit, but boy, that has
I
really,
think it is.
oh,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
certainly has. Look, if nothing else, it's almost like a tourist site. Hey, let's see where the Stones stayed at the Memory Motel. I mean, it really has taken on
And they didn't even stay there, people. they
correct, but
just
it's almost
they
taken
just
on an
popped in.
iconic kind of
I think they
status.
spent more time at Shagwong than they did at the Memory
And
Motel.
we're going to get into that. Great segue. We're going to get into that shortly. But hearing some of these things, that I pulled a couple of things just randomly off the internet because I can, because there's so much of this is urban legend and myth. But Mick Jagger at the Memory Motel was said to always be flirting, chatting up the waitresses, the women were as hanging at the bar. Keith Richard playing the jukebox, dropping in quarters. Quarters, remember that? Choosing American soul and country songs. And, Esperanza, here's something I really, and this is to your point from before, locals to this day still swear they had drinks with members of the band, but never realized who they were.
Yeah, I believe
And
it.
yeah, and as this
Well,
piece,
this was the time back in the day when people who came here who were famous could kind of disappear, and you were left alone, whether it was on purpose, like, oh, I recognize you but I'm not going to bug you, or just, I don't know who you are, like, you're just dude sitting next to me at the bar.
Esperanza, what an amazing statement, because I remember having a very similar conversation with you over this very platform, talking about Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe when they came here. I think it was Amagansett, but
Yes, yeah,
and we were talking about how today, you know, you're an influencer, you're a whatever. You're when you sneeze, you're posting it on social media,
yeah, you would be on
and
page 6 for, sneezing, and or
eh,
nothing important.
but
And all plastered all over People magazine.
right, but then you were really coming out here to get away from that, the same way Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe did, in the same way to a large extent, the Stones got did. And as this quote from wherever the heck I pulled this out of, Montauk was sleepy enough that not everyone recognized them right away. And,
Yeah,
again, this is, I mean, the Stones were, 1975. I mean, they were around at that point for 12, 13 years. I mean,
yeah.
Satisfaction was 63, or I think. I mean, so these were heavyweights, but Montauk, and I could sort of see that, Esperanza. Montauk maybe was that kind of place where they did let the Stones alone, particularly when they were there in the off season,
It
right?
just really was like that here. You didn't come here to be seen, you came here to be unseen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And,
Very
this
different from nowadays.
very, very different. And, the writer is telling a story how he's sort of disputing this, how it was a Mick and Keith sing along at the Memories Long Gone piano, the Stones wandering in for a hard to find pool table. It's that could be urban legend. But Hannah, apparently, this writer found Hannah, and she was a honey kind of girl, a honey of a girl, according to
She was still a honey kind
she
of
was a
girl.
honey of a
Not
girl,
quite sure
apparently.
what that means, but
I'm not going down. Yeah, we keep it clean on our Hamptons. We're not going down that road. But apparently, he tracked her down. She was apparently at the time of this article, and this article was written 11 years ago in 2014. But he tracked her down in East Hampton, and how she relays the story to him, how she was out walking towards her cabin, which was at the Deep Hollow Horse Ranch, and Mick apparently pulled up in a sedan.
I mean, I'm totally picturing this
I
because I
totally,
know that place, and I'm seeing this in my mind's eye.
I,
of this.
as am I.
Yeah,
It's funny you said we really do think a lot sometimes. I'm telling you, I was thinking the same thing, and like Mick is like in this car with a Lowenbrow wedged between his legs, right?
sexy.
And yeah, yeah, no, exactly. But and this woman who,
I love that. At first, she demurred,
yes,
but as he drove away, she was like, "What? Am I crazy?"
again, yeah, this affair just felt so. Yeah,
Like
Esperanza,
ran after him.
I assure you, I've never led a life like. Okay, I mean, I don't. There's a life going on here that I have no idea about. All right, but the affair just felt so easy and natural. The world's biggest rock star, facing the world's biggest tour, made every last move seem effortless.
Moves like Jagger.
Esperanza, let me see if I could channel Hannah's quote. I was breakfast for him. I never ever felt dirty or used. Okay, I'm not, I'm cool with that. I mean, that's, hey, but just the whole, and again, to your point, thinking about this, and I could really, this young woman encountering Mick Jagger in an off-season Montauk of 50 years ago. Yeah, what the heck?
Totally. I don't know if I would, but
I was never going to be presumptuous and
I'm not
ask
going to
that.
go there.
But I again, this was anyway. This is a good segue to get into, and the author brings this in, and this could be a podcast all of itself, talking about Jimmy Hewitt's Shagwong, right, Esperanza, and the author of this article is talking about how if there was a clubhouse at the heart of the wild East culture that was Montauk, it was the Shagwong. And, just goes on to discuss how first time Jagger came by, he had this strange notion. Apparently, he brought his own bottle of booze into the Shagwong Esperanza.
Yeah, yeah.
And Jimmy Hewitt, and this is a quote attributed to Jimmy Hewitt, told Christopher Lawrence, I kicked him out. I didn't know who the F he was. Okay. Apparently, the relationship was mended and they got along after that. And there were really some other quotes I got here from Jimmy Hewitt's memories. I got this really right off the internet again, urban legend. So we're not fact checking this because the whole story of the Stones in Montauk was urban legend. Mick kept a private bottle of Grand Marnier at the end of the bar, Esperanza. Bianca, you know, that was sort of our interesting. We don't get down into this gossipy thing, but Bianca and Mick were sort of. Had this sort of elegance to her, but apparently rolled up her designer sleeves and opened clams in the kitchen in Jimmy Hewitt Shagwong Inn at the time. And Mick invited Jimmy to hear the Stones rehearse often 2, 3 in the morning. Could you see it?
That would have been cool.
Yeah. You know, would have really fit into your lifestyle perfectly, Esperanza, having watched the sunrise as often as you have.
Exactly. And, to the point of being at that particular spot, which is about seeing the sunrise. You're right there.
Exactly true, and this article goes on to say how all of these things, there was such an orbit going on here between the Stones and Warhol. And to your point, it was going on really since 72, with Mick and Warhol. Europeans were visiting the place. And this really plays into what you were saying, how the lawns and the grasses reminded all of these European visitors of the Moors, right, Esperanza? I mean,
Yeah.
that really is so true. And I think it's a good part to really get into really Warhol, since we're talking about all of this, how Warhol actually put this in his memoir, Esperanza. Now, Andy Warhol wrote a memoir called Exposures. I remember you mentioned this before we started. Interesting how Warhol, I think we think he was in his 50s when he wrote this Warhol with this
Yeah, I
memoir,
don't know
because
when he wrote it, but he died I think he was 58 when he
Yeah.
died. He was
So,
quite young. So I just asked the question, it always amazes me. Wow, you wrote a memoir at, age 50. Like to me, a memoir is looking back on your life when you're much older, but yes,
but it's also possible that Andy Warhol was the kind of guy that knew he wasn't going to be around that much
he was
longer, too.
prescient. Yeah,
You know,
yeah, no, for sure.
but I mean, Warhol wrote in, and I don't want to take this line too much at face value because I don't think the implication is like that Montauk was nothing before Jagger got there. I think that's not the context he's saying. But Warhol was quoted as in this memoir as writing, Mick Jagger really put Montauk on the map. And I'm reading this directly. All the motels were overflowing with groupies. When Mick went into town, everything stopped. Surfers chased him from White's drugstore to White's liquor store. Now, this is sort of like almost the opposite of other things we've read. And that's why there's so much urban myth associated with this, because a lot of it, we just spoke about it a few minutes earlier, how the locals were sort of leaving him alone,
Yeah,
right?
leaving him alone. Yeah, yeah. But that said, I think that that did happen. It's so interesting to me to think that before social media, before, so many ways of communicating and putting news, quote unquote news out there, that there would be, I don't know, an article in a publication or the New York Times or wherever, somewhere in print
Right,
or on television possibly, but that people would line up to come and drive the 3 hour. I mean, this was a long drive
right,
even then, to come out here and follow whatever it was they had read about, and that happened in the 50s even.
right.
So it's not unusual to think that, or that probably these weren't necessarily the locals who following him around and the groupies. These were groupies that, yes, definitely were coming, booking hotels, staying, and chasing them around. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. But the locals, no.
1,000%. And, again, Esperanza, I keep coming back to this. Like, this is such a fun kind of episode to do so in a way because there's so much of it is just it's just legend. It's sort of taking on its own life. And
Yeah, and I'm sure there are people walking around in Montauk today that probably have
have a
these,
story.
yes, story to share about seeing him at White's, one
Yeah.
of the Whites.
And Warhol, and I could really picture this. Warhol in his memoir wrote about recalling one drunken night at the Shagwong where Mick danced along to and sang falsetto. And I remember this song, Esperanza. You may not, but I remember it. The Shirley and Company song, Shame, Shame,
Shame, shame,
Shame.
shame.
I mean, that was like, and I could picture this because to Mick's credit, he was sick of hearing Get Off of My Cloud, which was being played because they knew he was in on the jukebox was being played in there. So, and again, these tidbits I pulled off the internet, how security was loose, but not too loose. And it's implying how, despite their global fame, the Stones did move relatively freely in Montauk. Conversely, while there was minimal security, there were a few private guards at Eothen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible Warhol had private guards at Eothen, I mean, being sort of so isolated, and Warhol at the time he was living there was very famous himself. And again, this is getting into same
And
storyline.
I just want to state that from what I know, Warhol didn't actually spend a lot of time out here. I mean, not that he didn't at all, but this was a property that was continually rented out
That's right.
and it kind of paid for itself. And in fact, I think even um, Halston rented it for a while. And apparently the sort of quote unquote complaint from Warhol was a kind of like it sort of barely paid for the rent, like, or barely paid for the maintenance of the rent, barely paid for the maintenance of the place. So to my knowledge, he was not the most frequent resident.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, I mean, this is nothing going by research, but just like reading about, just from what we do organically, it never really felt like Warhol had an enormous presence in Montauk. Like, I mean, like sort of like really entrenched in the community, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know my mom saw, I remember my mom saying how she saw him at Guildhall once or twice, that kind of
Right.
thing. It wasn't like he wasn't around, but this was not the place that he would come out and spend summers or weekends every weekend or something like that. Think about it. Warhol was such an urban creature to me that for him to be in the country for any length of time. But they did do this great. I mean, we're totally going on a sidetrack. They did do this. Was it Cocaine Cowboys? They filmed that
Oh my goodness.
at the estate, actually.
Eothen could be an episode all unto itself. It
I
really,
think
it really
so.
could. I mean,
I
there's,
do.
and
What a history.
that is a place to your point. Like if those walls could talk, man, we would have some great stories. But
Totally.
we're going to start really wrapping this up. I mean, and it's just Esperanza reading the last, paragraph of this article. And again, this article is a 2014 Christopher Lawrence article out of Avenue magazine, and I'm just like sort of perusing this to sort of close this out. How Memory Motel, the song, it does shift locations because it was talking about them on the road. I remember this lyric. They had to fly today on down to Baton Rouge. But the article, this article closes how Hannah, Mick's, I don't know what you want to call her, fling, girlfriend at the time, whatever. Remember, this was also going on when his wife or his partner, Bianca, was there. But anyway, that's the rock star life that I have no idea about. But Hannah apparently brought them over to see the horses over at Deep Hollow Ranch, which was close to Eothen, like a rodeo. And there was just maybe 8 people there, another quiet night in Montauk. And goes on, and again, we're not a Rolling Stones podcast, but Keith Richard, who grew up working poor, spent his entire childhood dressed up as Roy Rogers, apparently dreaming of an America he saw in the cinema. I mean, listen to this. But that spring evening, Keith wandered around that ranch among the riders and spectators, resplendent in a three-piece pink satin suit. But
Oh gosh.
but I
And we
ha
think there are odd times now in
I
Montauk.
mean, I would agree with you, but Esperanza, I think this is going to be really as good a place to leave this as any. To just really the last line of this article, and I think this really sums it up perfectly. I'm going to read it to you, May. Would you give me that poetic
You're not
license?
going to sing it.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see. May have another duet in us, Esperanza, if we want to, but the Rolling Stones had gotten what they needed from the town before leaving it with stories to tell and a song to be sung. Just a memory of a love that used to be. That was a good lyric, Esperanza. Come on. You know, we don't
I
have to
think
be the
I like the
biggest,
lyrics more than I like the song. How's that?
an incredibly diplomatic way of putting it, but you are very
Sometimes
diplomatic.
poetry is just made to be poetry.
I, right, right. But that is a good line. And really, you could apply that to his relationship, or you could apply it to, you know, it's subjective, right? Of what he felt, for the community,
Being out here, yeah, being in Montauk.
whatever it was that Montauk gave them,
Yeah,
whether it was just this woman who claims she wasn't his breakfast, or whether it was just the entire aura of the place, you
yeah.
know, during
A special time, special place. Really is.
and at a moment in their lives when they were not expats, but had a tax issue and were sort of staying
In a limbo.
in,
Yeah.
in, a, in a state of limbo. And that's a great way of putting it, Esperanza. Is there really a better place to be in limbo than Montauk?
I can't think of a better place. Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there.
In 1975.
Yes. But we're going to leave it there because it's amazing how things happen organically here. But Esperanza, that's a place to be in limbo.
Yeah.
1975 Montauk. Esperanza, as always, thanks for going down this road of the Memory Motel. I'm going to ride by there and check it out next time I'm in Montauk. But
Yeah, yeah, do take a picture.
exactly. As always, a pleasure.
Thank you, Irwin.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.